Thank you. I think there's a PowerPoint, so if someone could bring that up, that would be great. This is really a very timely and important conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. As I said, I am based in Jackson, Mississippi, and as many of you know, Mississippi in the Deep South is at the core of so many issues that have affected people of color in this country. And so over the past year, we've had a lot of discussion about the anniversary of so many seminal civil rights era events, the March on Washington, the assassination of Medgar Evers, the passage of the Civil Rights Bill. And consistently, people acknowledge that much work, while we've had much progress, much remains to be done. Certainly, this is the case in our region. Someone earlier talked about the recent discussions about Donald Sterling, which have been fascinating. But I think we all know that Magic Johnson, Blake Griffin, and Doc Rivers will be okay. It's a terrible situation, and I'm glad I'm encouraged by how it's being addressed. But, you know, there are a lot of Donald Sterlings in communities that I serve. They control jobs, they control board seats, they control access to capital for people who don't have the ability of magic to confront them. And so this really underscores my strong belief that the unfinished business of the civil rights era is what Martin Luther King was talking about in Memphis before he was assassinated. It's economic justice. And that's certainly been an important topic of the conversation today. You can go to the next slide. In 2014, as it was back in 1963 and 1964, there are glaring disparities in wealth across the country, certainly no more so than in the Deep South. In our region, 19% of white children grow up in poverty compared to almost over half of black children in Mississippi. 43% of the child population in Mississippi are African American, and in no other state is it greater than 40%. So it's a serious problem, not just for this generation, but for the future. And this is so important given what we know about the relationship between poverty and development later in life, and negative social outcomes, dropping out of school, incarceration, teen pregnancy. You go on to the high cost of home lending. Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana have the highest rates of high cost lending in the country. These rates are driven by the high rates in the African American community. Nationwide, only 2.2% of all loans to whites were high cost. In Mississippi, it's almost 6%. Access to banking. At a time when banks are experiencing the highest profits in history, we recovered from the financial crisis. If you look at the earnings generated by financial institutions, 150 billion last year, up from a $10 billion loss in 2009, right after the recession. But at this same time, bank branches are closing in record numbers in low-income communities. A Bloomberg study talked about 93% of the bank branches that have closed since 2008 in low-income census tracts. There are bank deserts emerging across the country. It's not just in the Deep South, but it's in Oakland, it's in Chicago, it's everywhere. And so this is really a serious problem, particularly because when these banks leave, payday lenders run in. I've seen often the first knock on the door after a bank branch closed, someone trying to buy that branch, it is a payday lending outlet that's going to charge folks what should be illegal rates, but unfortunately aren't yet. Those who are most vulnerable, the highest cost for small dollar loans. Gloria, one of our members, was taking care of a family. She had a job, wasn't a great paying job, but she was taking care of her 2 kids. Then her car broke down. She went to get a $300 payday loan to fix the car. Well, 8 payday loans later, she owed over $2,000 and was caught in a debt trap that she could not climb out of. And this happens family after family. It's not just people of color. It is elderly. It's young adults. It is people who are on the outside of the financial system looking in, and it's getting worse and worse as these bank does expand across the country. My next slide talks about what we have done at Hope. We have, over the past 20 years, grown from a $1.5 million business loan fund focusing on 55 counties in the Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana Delta to a 4-state regional financial institution that has been able to assist over half a million people in the years that we've been at this. Our work's not rocket science. It's being deliberate and intentional about providing these communities with the tools that many of us take for granted, that certainly people in affluent communities, communities that are banked, take for granted. Because there's a very clear relationship between bank branch presence and the rate of lending and the rate of high-cost lending in areas where there's not a bank branch, or the rate of payday lending in communities where there's not a bank branch. So we've been trying to go into these communities in a regulatory environment that, quite frankly, I'm getting a little frustrated with the constant beating up of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. I mean, it's not perfect, but we cannot sit on the sideline and not do anything. People are being abused, and finally we have an agency whose job is to protect consumers, whether it's mortgage loans, payday small dollar loans, remittances, credit cards, student loans, which is becoming the highest, one of the highest items on a family's balance sheet. These issues are critical, and we've got an agency under this administration that's trying to tackle that. So I think we need to maybe not pat them on the back, but certainly give them win and help them to get it right. It's a really challenging and fastly moving, fastly changing financial system that we live in now. But again, it is not rocket science. I am blown away when banks, some of the largest banks in Mississippi, moved out of towns that were actually growing, nice branches, but they decided that it didn't fit into their business model, not because these people all of a sudden stopped needing access to resources to support their families, but because it wasn't as profitable for them. And so we've got to look at ways to hold those banks more accountable. We can do some things about our CRA, which hopefully we'll talk about a little later, and there are some other very clear steps that we can take. But I think you all have heard everybody knows, what's the song say? God bless the child. We've got to own our own. We've got to own our own businesses. We've got to own our own financial institutions. That's what people in Terry, Mississippi, and Utica, Mississippi, and Itabena, Mississippi, College Station, Mississippi, Utica, Mississippi, all across the Deep South have done when we've gone in and given them the tools to organize their own credit union. They own it. They are the shareholders. It's not someone else in a distant community. They have the tools to make decisions that are in their best interest. I think policy is important, but also is action and taking control of our own futures. Thank you.